What excites me the most about the UAE is the fact that it has such a promising future. We're a new country relative to a lot of countries in the rest of the world. And so what we've done is really focus on the future.
الحكومة الأقوى هي الحكومة اللي تملك قاعدة بيانات قوية وقاعدة تواصل واتصال بين البيانات المختلفة في عدة مجالات الحكومية التي تخدم المجتمع. وأصبحت اليوم مدينة أبو ظبي أو مدينة دبي من المدن السباقة عالميا في مستوى ذكاء المدن.
خلال 5 إلى 10 سنوات القادمة ستتغير خريطة العالم بحيث تكون التكنولوجيا هي من تضع فارق التقدم والمنافسة.
In the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see the onset of these really exciting AI models, and they're known as generative artificial intelligence models. Classic example of generative AI models are ChatGPT. But the amazing thing is that we have local builders here within the UAE that are actually investing into building generative AI models. And simultaneously, they're investing into building artificial intelligence models that can also explain how Gen AI models build.
نموذج نور وهو أكبر نموذج لمعالجة اللغة الطبيعية باستخدام اللغة العربية. هذه نماذج مثل نموذج نور أو نموذج شات جي بي تي، هذه نماذج ستساهم في تحسين جودة الحياة البشرية. ممكن استخدامها في عملية التعليم، تحسين جودة التعليم في المدارس، ممكن أيضاً استخدامها لتحسين وتحليل بيانات معينة سواء كان في القطاع الخدمات اللوجستية، في قطاع الخدمات المالية، في تحليل علم البيانات والطاقة أو علم البروتينات وغيرها.
حماية البيئة وتطوير تقنيات تحمي البيئة سواء كانت بالمجال الزراعي أو في المجال البحري والتلوث الجوي هي دائما من الأمور المهمة جدا لنا كشعب وكدولة، ودائما نسعى إلى تطوير التقنيات التي ممكن تخدم بيئتنا بشكل خاص وبيئة العالم بشكل عام.
We are now surrounded by the rise of exponential technologies like AI and cloud computing and quantum computing that are completely transforming the way that we live and the way that we work. The most exciting aspect of all of this is how it will take us into the next evolution of humanity. This will drive us into life 3.0 or humanity 3.0, and that is the most exciting part of living in this technological era.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سمو الشيخ سيف بن زايد آل نهيان، نائب رئيس مجلس الوزراء وزير الداخلية، سمو الشيوخ أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، السيدات والسادة، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. اسمحوا لي في البداية بالتعريف عن نفسي. معاكم طلال القيسي، الرئيس التنفيذي في شركة G42 كلاود، جزء من شركة G42 للذكاء الاصطناعي والحوسبة السحابية. يسعدني اليوم أن أرحب بكم وأود أن أبارك لكم بهذا الشهر الفضيل. محاضرة اليوم بعنوان التكنولوجيا والاتجاهات الناشئة، كيف نتبنى منظورا مستقبليا في التفكير، تقدمها إيمي ويب، وستقوم من خلالها باستعراض رؤيتها وأفكارها في هذا المجال. ونلفت عنايتكم إلى أن المحاضرة ستكون باللغة الإنجليزية، وبإمكانكم استخدام السماعات لمتابعة الترجمة الفورية. واسمحوا لي الآن بأن أتحدث باللغة الإنجليزية. Your Highnesses, Excellencies, Ladies and Gentlemen. It's an honor to moderate today's session about how leaders can harness a futurist's mindset and the tools to help forecast technology trends as well as their impact of their convergence in the future. Our esteemed guest, Amy Webb, is the founder and CEO of the Future Today Institute and professor of strategic foresight at NYU. As a futurist, Amy is known for her ability to identify and analyze emerging trends in technology, business, and society. Her insights into the future of artificial intelligence, synthetic biotechnology, and the Internet of Things have helped organizations around the world plan for a rapidly changing future. With her expertise in strategic foresight and her passion for helping organizations navigate uncertainty, Amy is a leading voice in the field of future studies. Please join me in welcoming Amy Webb to deliver her remarks.
Good afternoon. I would like to express my gratitude to His Highness and to the leadership of the UAE for your vision and for welcoming me here to have this conversation with you, and for the idea of a more human-centered future. I would also like to express my appreciation for Ramadan, a tradition which I do not personally celebrate, but which deeply resonates with me. It really is a beautiful opportunity for reflection and a wonderful time to contemplate the futures. The theme of this year is people-centered. So I have a question for you to start thinking through. When you think about the future of this incredible place, who are the people inhabiting the Emirates in the future? And when you think about the future, where are you? What version of you is living in that future? What is that world? The thing that we are doing here together is an essential forum for the community to discuss ideas and to raise important issues, placing you, your communities, at the center of that discussion and conversation. So this afternoon, I really would like to get you into the mindset as we start thinking like futurists, of yourselves in the center, this community in the center, all of you in the sort of center of this talk. Today we're going to contemplate the futures of the Emirates, and I say futures, plural, because there is no one predetermined or predestined future. The future is the result of the decisions, the conversations that we have in the present. So here's the plan for the next few minutes. I'm going to start with two short stories. One of them may be familiar to you, the other may not. I'll then introduce the concept of world building and why it's such an effective tool both in the creative fields but also in business and in government. I'm going to share an easy framework with you and give you a glimpse as I do that into some of the latest developments in artificial intelligence. Then I will offer some perspective on scenarios along with another easy framework. And again, in that case, the example will be a glimpse into some of what's happening in the futures of bioengineering. Then we'll talk about what it takes for organizations to really lead into those futures when there is so much deep uncertainty. What does it take to get to action? Finally, I will ask you to contemplate your own futures using this new foresight perspective. So let's start with that first quick story. Allow me to be a future historian for just a moment. Let's think about the early 2020s. Human society made some critical mistakes. Our grandfathers depleted natural resources, not just water, but also trees and land. And by the year 2080, there were multiple international space agencies, NASA, of course, but also the UAE-SA, the United Arab Emirates Space Agency, which by that point had become one of the world's most important and prominent. Along with the other space agencies in Europe and India, collectively there was a decision that in order for humankind to survive, we needed to search nearby planets for resources that could be used by humanity back here on Earth. So in the year 2100, these space agencies, they settled on a place called Pandora, a moon in the Alpha Centauri star system. And it had lush forests, it had water, it had plenty of valuable minerals. In fact, it looked a little bit like the old rainforests of the Amazon in Brazil. And while Pandora's atmosphere was totally inhospitable to humans, it was perfect for the Na'vi. A human-like people who were 3 meters tall with bioluminescent markings that we think are maybe connected to a central nervous system that glowed in different ways depending on how the Na'vi were feeling. The Na'vi have an egalitarian social organization built around hunting and fishing and handicraft, centralized by the worship of a god who protects life on that moon. The Na'vi strive to maintain perfect harmony and to really respect their environment, only taking the resources that they need. In fact, the Na'vi believe, they have a saying, that every person is born twice. The second time is when you earn your place among the people forever. Okay, so I'm talking about the movie Avatar. Have any of you seen Avatar before? So this is still the highest grossing film ever made, $2.9 billion globally. Why was this movie so popular? From my point of view, it was actually not a very good story. And the dialogue wasn't so great, and yet the concept, the idea of this movie persists. The answer is world building. And this future that James Cameron created, it's visceral. It's described verbally. It's described visually, in copious detail, in simple ways that any person in any culture anywhere on Earth can relate to. The Na'vi have their own language. They have their own culture, which is described in detail. They have a particular uniform. They have a visual brand, how they worship, how they marry. All of these details that make up the world are relatable to us. They're so clear, they're so vivid that we can easily immerse ourselves in that place. This is world building. World building is the creative act of imagining, designing, and implementing a world that evolves or diverges from today. World building is foundational to storytelling, but it's also a vital part of strategic foresight and long-term planning in government and in business. So I'd like to tell you another quick story of world building. This time, though, I'm going to start in the past, the distant past, in the 1980s. So in the 1980s, there was a man who thought he was going to be a theoretical physicist. He was obsessed with space. He wanted to go out and explore the universe. So he enrolled in Princeton University, quickly determined he could not keep up with the other students. So he changed his major and studied computer science. He graduates, he goes on to work at a hedge fund, and he's still fascinated with space. In the meantime, there is this brand new thing called the internet. So he starts thinking about how the world might look different, how it might diverge from where it was at that point, how it could shape the future of communications, how it could shape the future of commerce, and how it might even shape the future of space. So in 1994, he started with a what-if question that challenged the status quo. What if, in the future, shopping was on this internet thing? Brand new idea that didn't exist at the time. And what if maybe he starts selling books for short? He would need a name for that store. Initially, that name was Cadabra, as in abracadabra, because the store, in his mind, in his world that he was building, it would work like magic. And it would make the experience completely frictionless for consumers. The problem is that cadabra sounded a lot like cadaver, which made people think of death. So instead, he decided, thinking about the farther future, he probably needs a different name. So he settles on Amazon. Because he wasn't just planning on building a bookstore. This wasn't just about a business idea. He was trying to create a system of systems, an interconnected approach of many different concepts and ideas. And this world that he was building needed something bigger. The Amazon River proved to be a pretty good strategy. That river, it consists of 20% of the world's fresh water. It's a third of all of the known plant and animal insect species, and is literally necessary to support human life on this planet, regardless of where in the world you live. Also, A comes first in the alphabet. So that was, he thought, a good thing, good strategic advantage going forward. So this is the beginning of Amazon.com, a company that was never just a business. It was never going to just be an online bookstore, because Jeff Bezos did his own version of strategic world building in advance. You could see it. You could actually, I'm going to show it because the font is very small. Inside of this screenshot from the launch of this website, he's talking about artificial intelligence. Some of what you just heard on that video from the other speakers, he described in 1995. In fact, they built a prototypical tool to make some of that happen. To do effective world building, it's not enough to brainstorm. You have to have some type of rubric. So this is the first framework, and it's very simple to remember. We call it STREEP plus C. If you're a Meryl Streep fan, this becomes top of mind going forward. So STREEP basically just stands for social factors. These are local, national, federal, international. Technologies, which also include science. Regulatory factors, environmental factors, economic factors, ethics, so deeply held values and beliefs, and of course, politics. And the last one is culture, C. And the issue is that while culture comes up in some circumstances, when we're talking about the future of business or the future of government, art, philosophy, music, fashion, customs, sometimes these get forgotten, which is a mistake. Now you'll notice all of these are equal as far as I'm concerned, and they all interconnect, because at this point they are very interdependent. So this framework is what establishes the world of the future, whether that story is creative for film and television, like Avatar, or it's strategic, and that world is business, like Amazon. So let's go back to Amazon for just a moment. The corporate world of Amazon is very unique, and the world building that happened encompasses this. So for example, in lieu of a PowerPoint deck, which unfortunately is most of the corporate world, instead, Amazon employees have to write a short memo in a very specific format before executive meetings. Why? Because the belief by the leaders is that a really charismatic person can sell an idea sometimes when that idea is not very good. So if instead everybody reads together at first, they're more likely to make better decisions. This is part of a world, part of the atmosphere that got created in order to make this company successful. The Amazon campus in Seattle is built a little bit like a biodome. So these things are called the spheres. I've actually been there a couple of times before, and it's a really interesting place. This is downtown Seattle. This is offices. These geodesic domes have 40,000 species of plants on the inside. It's got perfect humidity, which for somebody like me, and the hair that I have, is nice. It's a contained ecosystem. This is the world where people work, and they have their meetings. There are restaurants, there's a conference center, there's ample connectivity, and some might say that the spheres are practice for space, which is another part of this world. The world of Amazon is obsessively focused on the consumer, on people, and of course the company works relentlessly on automation and efficiencies. So Amazon is one of the world's most valuable and influential companies today, not because it started off as a tiny business, but because of this effective world building that created the vision and enabled the future scenarios that ultimately led to strategic planning and smart decisions by leaders. Now, how does this relate to all of you? It turns out you already know some of the smartest visionaries and the best strategic planners that have ever lived anywhere on Earth, because they are your founding fathers. These people engaged in world building. They imagined a future world that diverged from what had existed at the time. It was a different approach, a unified and harmonious society, a future epicenter for business and for governing, where international languages would be spoken, culture would be inclusive, with a long-term vision for social projects and economic development. We don't see anything else like this in the modern world, other than what we see here in the UAE. Effective world building should result in a vision that compels people. That vision should result in an emotional response. And the whole point of doing this, challenging the status quo, is so that you can continue to grow and to thrive. But I've noticed, because I mostly deal with executives in Fortune 100 companies and governments outside of here, is that especially in the past few years, leaders do not want their current ideas to be challenged. And I think this is a mistake, because as it turns out, the world outside is changing drastically. And the easiest way to see this is through generative AI, which is all many people have been talking about for the past few months. And in particular, something called ChatGPT. So if you are not familiar with this, let me quickly give you a bit of background information. So in 2017, there were some Google researchers that published this paper called Attention is All You Need, which introduced the concept of something called a transformer. And a transformer is simply a neural network that can learn context in sequential data. While this doesn't seem all that thrilling, it did fundamentally change our relationship to information. And this transformer system is what underpin the large language models. In the video, you heard about Nur. That's a local language model, and this is the technology that underpins that. These large language models, they can recognize, summarize, translate, predict, and generate text automatically, but other kinds of things too. And they do this from massive data sets. So the GPT in ChatGPT, the T stands for transformer. And you don't have to get super technical, but it's useful to understand how these systems work because they influence you as leaders. You have to start with an idea, otherwise known as a prompt, which is really just an instruction. So a phrase, a sentence you provide to a model that then produces a result. So I know that healthcare, the future of health, the future of genomics, is a big focus within the UAE. So I thought that I would show you an example from healthcare to help you understand what's happening. So let's say that you have a bunch of patient records and you want to gain some insights. Your patient data in this country is locked up in an EHR, electronic health record, as it is in my country, in the United States. The problem is that because of privacy restrictions that we all want in place, it can be hard to make use of these data. So this is a synthetic data set that I made. I just put a bunch of names in, potential health issues, things like that. And what I did was I ran this through this new generative AI tool. And the prompt basically said, take these data and then make it anonymous so that I can still gain insights without divulging any personal information. So like, this is what it looked like, which is pretty exciting because it took me 1 second in order to make this work. Now, what if I wanted to find insights in all of this information? I would need another prompt. So let's say that I took, and I did, 2 data sets, one from 2010 and one from 2023. And I just wanted to anonymize and then compare them. So this is the result. I got a very thoughtful analysis. It explained why some health outcomes might be improving. It removed those specific data points from the patient population. I learned that stress and asthma are continuing to increase. Maybe there's a correlation. It took me 1.3 seconds. Now, you might be thinking, Iftar is like right around the corner. Why is she talking about this? This is a cute parlor trick, but what does this have to do with us as leaders and generative AI and the futures of the Emirates? It has everything to do with you. I only have 25 minutes. This is literally just one of 1,000 examples that I could show you. Let me explain what this is. So it turns out the leaders of the UK government spent a ton of money and a year just to see if maybe, possibly, someday, it might be possible to find patterns in health data. The exact same thing that I did. I got a rudimentary proof of concept in 2.4 seconds, and it cost me $0. That's actually not true. It cost me 2 cents, because right now, it costs about 2 cents to run a query on GPT-4. Listen, as leaders, you do not need to have technical expertise on AI. But AI is very much a part of your future world. So being able to have a conversation about it is only going to help you going forward, because there are all types of models now that can do all different types of things. This one is from DeepMind at Google. It's called a generalist AI, and it can do many different things at once. It can play Atari, it can control robot arms, and this generalist AI is an important step to achieving artificial general intelligence. We're on that road right now. So again, if general AI and generalist AI is part of your future, then we should do some world building. How could you start to imagine religion, culture, politics, ethics needing to evolve? How would generative AI lead to greater insights and efficiencies? How will this shape Emirati society? How might it challenge the way that you govern and the way that you lead? How does generative AI influence your vision of the future? World building sets the stage for planning. The planning is scenarios. Scenarios are what give us some guardrails. So they help us make decisions that are evidence-based so that we can achieve the outcomes that we want. This should not be guesswork. So this is, again, the process that we use. What are the things influencing the future? These are the things that we, at the moment, the information that we can know in the present. And then we distill that into what might the future look like. So these are narratives describing different plausible outcomes. And then finally, what is your future? In other words, where does the UAE play and how do you win? So signals and trends, macro scenarios, and the strategic scenarios that should drive your decision making. So a lot of organizations do this. As a country, this is something you do. But I do want to illustrate a big mistake I've been seeing among leaders when they try to make decisions in this way. And it's what I call the pillars of stuff approach. I was working with the CEO of a global telecommunications company recently, and he had read this book that he really liked that said there were 4 pillars of disruption coming, which were very vague and honestly could have applied to literally any industry. But he applied these 4 pillars to that company's growth strategy. Now the problem is it forced everybody in the company to use these 4 things. It ignored what was happening on the outside. It didn't allow them to fully explore uncertainty. Scenarios are useful when they allow you to explore uncertainty, to explore white spaces, the stuff that you cannot yet know. And in a lot of cases, these will be things that feel disconnected to government, to business, but which in fact will shape the world to come. So let's consider the futures of a different area of technology, another place in which you are heavily invested, and that's bioengineering and human enhancement. A lot of organizations that are outside of health or healthcare aren't really tracking this right now. If you're not familiar, bioengineering seeks to redesign or even invent biological code to have useful or improved purposes. Bioengineering represents the other GPT, it's a general purpose technology. And the steam engine was a general purpose technology. Electricity, the internet, these are things that fundamentally altered society and the economy. Last summer, I did a project with some economists who are friends. I was curious to know what's the total valuation of the internet. There is no way to calculate it because it's everywhere. The only way is to do it in reverse. If we shut down the internet, how much money would be lost? So if bioengineering is a new general purpose technology that is poised to impact literally every industry, as you can see here, then the question would be, why isn't every single industry paying attention? Let me share with you 3 short examples that are very relevant to you. Let's start with farming. Agriculture was a major sector, a major driver here. It's less so today. But within the next couple of years, it's going to be possible to start with a tiny bit of animal tissue and from that amount grow all of the meat that a population might need to eat. Which means that in the future, this is what an Emirati farm could look like. So this thing is called a bioreactor. You start with some tissue, you put in amino acids and some other things that are natural, organic. You can control the temperature, the humidity, just like an animal that might have grown inside of its mother. And at the end, you have tissue that has been grown humanely and is the same as tissue that you might have gotten from an animal harvested for its meat. So what if, for example, the UAE grew all of the beef and all of the poultry that you consume domestically? What if you become a regional exporter of food in the future with this new type of farm? A couple of other quick examples. Banking. People don't link banking and biology. It's possible now to store data inside of DNA. You can store genetic code inside of an asset, like an NFT, which everybody was talking about last year, a non-fungible token, which means that in the future, this could be a new type of asset class. Banks are very, very slow to change. This could make banks vulnerable. But you are a center of innovation, which means you could drive global thinking on some of this. The third area, finally, is the oil and petroleum sector. What if it was possible to keep mining and refining petroleum for plastics, which normally you've got COP coming up in November, right? So this would be normally not something people want to discuss. What if you could make more plastic because there was an enzyme that could break that plastic down entirely in a way that was totally biodegradable, caused no harm to the environment? So all of this is on our horizon. The problem is we're not having the right conversations right now. So if we know that impact is coming, then we have to start thinking today about what is that strategy? What does change management as a leader need to look like? Because other types of changes are coming. This same technology will promise life extension and potentially human enhancement. Now is a time for you to think, if I could enhance myself, what would I choose? Would you enhance yourself with Neanderthal genes? They had thicker skin, lots of collagen. Their bodies were more adapted to harsh climates. This is why scientists are studying this right now. This thing that you see is called a body on a chip. There are real organs that are functioning on this thing using real data, and it's a way to test these new types of mixtures, these new systems. This thing is actually alive. And they're now studying Neanderthal genes. They've been working on growing a brain. So again, engage in what-if thinking. How does bioengineering influence your vision for the future of the Emirates? How will this influence the people here? How would you manage regulations? What about your values and your ethics? Think about your culture, as well as economic and political impacts. Again, where might the UAE play and win? Because of all the places in the world that I can think of, this is a really interesting neutral location for some of this research to be done. So I've rattled off some emerging trends, AI and bioengineering, and with so much change happening so fast, it can feel overwhelming. And that can lead to entropy. So what I would urge you to do going forward is to start categorizing where are the things that we must take action on right now. Otherwise, we potentially lose the market or we incur new risk, things like that. What must we make a decision about at some point? And then finally, what will we monitor going forward? As leaders, you should continuously be prioritizing these types of decisions, because the issue is when you hear emerging trends, it's easy to put that aside and not to get to the work of the scenarios thinking or planning, and therefore you never get to action. We see this happen in lots of organizations. The antidote to it is to continually prioritize. So, as you contemplate human-centered solutions and a people-centered future, who are those people? What are the external forces that are influencing decisions, their lived experiences? How can you be planful in the future that you want to accomplish? And who are you in the future? As a leader, what are you called to build? When I first arrived here a day and a half ago, I had the opportunity to visit the Louvre. And I was really, really inspired by this work of art. This is the thumbprint of Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, and it's surrounded by hundreds, maybe thousands of concentric circles. It illustrates everything that I've been talking about today. how the actions and decisions of leaders result in ripples that spread far and wide. As you build this new future, I invite you to use the perspective on world building. Remember to incorporate emerging technologies and science even when that challenges your cherished beliefs, and to create scenarios to explore white spaces. And importantly, not to wait to get to action, but to figure out ways to act, monitor, and decide going forward. Remember, as leaders, you need to start asking what if now, so that you never need to ask now what in the future. I wish you a blessed and generous Ramadan. Ramadan Mubarak.
Amy, thank you very much for that incredibly insightful overview. I can't believe how far in the future we were able to peek with what you described over here. So it's incredible to see the power of such foresight. I'd like to ask a few questions. A lot of the technologies you described either depend on a significant amount of data or produce large volumes of data. In the business I run today at G42 Cloud, we have a sovereign cloud, and it's predicated on trying to keep data within a country's borders and ensure that we prevent leakage. How do you balance between the privacy concerns when it comes to data, and you showed the example of PII data, for example, with healthcare, and not curtailing innovation?
Sure, it's a great question, and I had the opportunity to visit G42 yesterday and see some of the phenomenal work, really phenomenal work that's being done, especially because you have cloud, you've got bioengineering, you've got AI, you've got all of these different space sort of horizontally integrated, which is a smart approach. So what do? Listen, in a lot of countries, we either see a very heavy-handed government approach. Mm-hmm. It's not just a sovereign cloud, but it's a sovereign cloud with government, oversight, whatever. And therefore, the government gets to take all the information they want. It's not private. Or we see the opposite, which is a completely commercial approach. I'm talking about the United States, where we don't have a government cloud. We've outsourced. This is an interesting middle ground. And one of the things that I really admire about UAE leadership, the government is continuously in prototyping mode. So what you're talking about is, in a way, just a new approach. And you know that you have a vested interest in keeping those PIIs safeguarded. And you know that there's a great opportunity in having that sovereign cloud, right? So I don't think this stifles innovation. If anything, I honestly think it opens the door to greater innovation because there are some more securities, there's more certainty.
Right.
That's the other thing. It introduces the idea of certainty versus, I don't know, maybe 5 years from now we hop over to another cloud, maybe we become multi-cloud,
It's interesting you say that. I think, especially you visited the omics facility where the UAE's population genome program, one of the most advanced, I think it's probably the deepest and furthest breadth genomics program globally. But privacy is also a concern in that context. So what do you think like a program of that nature could have on the advancements in advanced biotechnology and healthcare? And how do you ensure that people are comfortable with taking part in these types of efforts?
Sure. Let me also offer some context. This project this country's leadership on that project is so important because the Middle East was effectively left out of the genomics databases that existed. They are really, they leave everybody out. So you're not benefiting from other human genome projects because your genomes are a little different. Again, so visiting that facility, one of the things that I was struck by was you've got American sequencers, you've got European sequencers, and you've got Chinese sequencers. There are walls up against each one. I mean, the crazy, insane level of security, just people not being able to look over the, tells me that you're probably taking, again, a very serious approach. Trust and privacy are sacrosanct. The moment that you break trust, it's over. So again, I feel like you have a vested interest in safeguarding that privacy, and you must be doing a pretty good job because you've got, what, half of the Emirati population already sequenced, something like that? It's a question.
True.
Yeah.
And you know, the interesting part of also kind of the description you had of ChatGPT, for example, in your presentation was, you know, there are always these hype cycles in technology, and it seems like ChatGPT kind of falls within that type of a hype cycle. And you kind of predicted this in a sense when you looked at GPT-3 back in South by Southwest early 2022. Do you think that the societal reaction and the delivery of that product ventured out the same way you thought it would initially?
Right, so the short answer is yes. And a caveat that the real job of a futurist, and my background is quantitative, so, but the real job is not to make predictions, it's to make organizations prepared. When it comes to ChatGPT, in February of 2020, as COVID was distracting us, to be fair, ChatGPT-2 came out. So the company behind it, OpenAI, had a press release that literally said, this is so dangerous, we can't release it, right? It's been 3 years. Why is everybody collectively freaking out? Right? They told us that they had already built this thing. Now it's being released. The freak out should have been around like, how come we didn't do anything? You know what I mean? So listen, you're absolutely right. The hype cycles can be very powerful. Again, I go back to Amazon for a moment, and I think that's part of the reason why these memos are such an entrenched part of that culture. Right. Because these ideas can start to gather steam. And you know, I talked about world building. People they're making connections between ChatGPT and movies that they've seen. So it starts to feel like something it's actually not, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're coming short on time, so I'd like to conclude by recapping on a few thoughts regarding the value of strategic foresight and the importance of factoring this methodology in our respective organizations. Whether you're part of a company or a government institution, the technological disruptions we are witnessing across various domains will inevitably necessitate our need to be adaptable in coping with change and remaining competitive. Amy's work highlights the importance of planning for the future while also being mindful of the potential risks and unintended consequences associated with technological progress. Her expertise and passion for helping organizations prepare for a rapidly changing future make her a valuable resource for anyone interested in the intersection of technology and society. We saw examples in the videos of the things that UAE organizations are doing that move the needle in several of these areas, and we're blessed that our government places such a strong emphasis on future long-term planning, which in turn benefit from applying the methodology Amy shared to both mitigate risks and unlock opportunities. I'd like to thank His Highness and Amy Webb and the honorable guests for their attendance today. And I'd finally like to invite His Highness Sheikh Saif bin Zayed Al Nahyan and the participants in the video to join us up on stage for a group photo. Thank you all very much.
الحياة